All right.
Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And we can do the introduction of members. I'm Heather Daigle with the Affordable Housing Trust, Vice Chair.
I'll go next. Deanna Fay, member of the Affordable Housing Trust.
Ruth Pino, a member of the Affordable Housing Trust.
I'm Larry Oakes, the newest member of the Affordable Housing Trust.
Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm David Fields, Community Development Director with the city and member of the trust.
And we have Chris Lavasco here, who's going to give us an update in a little bit for the YMCA projects. Everybody got the minutes of the last meeting. Do we have a motion to approve or any changes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Nope. Can we get a motion? Okay. Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. So I think next order to business is to recognize the service of Michael Luster and Joe Bertolino. I thought they were going to be here, but they're not. So yeah, sad to see them go, but we can move forward now.
Yeah, I think Mike was a founding member, so thank him for his, I think he said 13 years of service. So
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize it was that long.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, Mike, if you are on here somewhere. So the election of the new chair. I'm not sure how to go about that, David.
well, first we could ask, I guess, are there any nominations? And if so, we could entertain the nomination if somebody makes a motion.
Yeah. Anybody have any recommendations?
Right, Larry, here you go. Big moment.
Wow.
Just kidding, putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Let me ask a question. Doesn't it make more sense to have Heather take the meetings to the next meeting until everyone's on board, all the new people? And then do this?
I think that's what I was kind of hoping to just maybe do interim until we have a full board again.
I like that idea. Do we have to vote on that idea? I like that idea.
Not necessarily. The vice chair should be acting in the interim. So which is what we're doing. I don't have any, nobody put forward anybody else, any other names. So we will be waiting on another person. But yeah, we can certainly roll to the next meeting.
Great.
Oh, here comes Chris McCarthy. Hi, Larry.
Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Hi, Chris.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Good.
Okay.
Chris, do we have to do introductions for Chris since we already did the introductions?
Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Chris McCarthy.
There you go.
All right, perfect. So Chris, we just kind of said that for the election of the new chair, we're going to wait till we have a full board again. And so I'll just do it in the interim until we find some other people.
Gotcha.
Madam Interim Chair,
Interim chair, yeah.
when we approved the minutes, we didn't mention who was going to take minutes for this meeting. I think we assigned them at the last meeting, but I'm happy to take the minutes for this meeting tonight, and we'll decide who does it next time.
All right, that works for me. Does it work for
Great.
everybody else?
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you.
And David, are the minutes from the meetings put on the website from the last meeting, or do they do that?
They're sent to the clerk's office. They need to be approved before we can post them.
Oh, okay,
So
perfect.
once they're approved.
All right, good to know. So I think we're ready for Chris Lavasco's update.
Hi, Chris.
Hi,
Good
Chris.
evening, everyone.
Thank you for
guys
coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you. I believe I've got a couple of colleagues probably kind of watching, and I want to recognize them. Arina McWilliam Lopez is our executive director in Cape Ann. Just celebrated her first year anniversary and is doing amazing. If you have not met Irina, I know I can speak for her to say, please stop by the Y and introduce yourself. Also, David Goodwin, our Executive Director of Housing, he was also available. So any specific questions, I may loop them in, but I think I can take it from here. First off, thank you all. Thank you for your belief, your support in affordable housing. Through the Y, we're really happy to be able to take that idea and that desire and that passion and actually turn it into action. And that's exactly what we've been able to do so far. If you recall, the funding that this group gave us, combined with several other community gifts of support, really were essential, because we could take those just under probably $700,000-800,000 combined and present that to the state. And when the state sees there's that level of commitment from the community, I believe that was what is allowed us to get a first round subset approval. That is not the easiest thing to do. So although we weren't awarded in the first round because of the community support and the project and the organization's history, we were invited to a special round only for those who applied and weren't funded. And we received that, which is much shorter time than we normally would wait. So excited about our start. We couldn't have done it. We couldn't get a $26 million investment in Gloucester without the first donation that we got, our support payment, which is you guys. So you started that ball rolling and everybody else joined on board. So thank you for that. I figure pictures are worth more than me talking. So I believe I was given an ability. I'm going to share my screen. So I'm going to give that a try. It is not long, but it gives you a little bit of a better idea of what we're doing. So we're talking about our John Jay Affordable Senior Housing Project, 71 Middle Street, perfect location for our 44 to 88 seniors with a preference for veterans who will live in the heart of Gloucester, able to walk to restaurants, able to walk to amenities, all of the different shops downtown. This is a perfect location and people are very excited about it. So I think you guys know we started the demo. That was the big deal. That started actually after all the prep and everything was around January of 2023. You can see the building that was there coming down. It just kept coming down and eventually it's gone. The cleanup was intense. I think they did a magnificent job clearing that out, utilizing all the paths that were created. So after demo comes construction. This actually just started in May. So it feels like 1,000 years ago, but it has begun and we're coming out of the ground. You'll see that we ran into some obstacles I'll talk about a little bit later, but as you really start to look at it, the most important thing is this existing foundation literally holds up 3 sides of the street. So this was not as easy as a knockdown and build back up because we had to take a lot of shoring precautions to make sure we didn't lose any of the streets on the 3 sides. So that's been under construction. We've got a wall coming out of the ground. It's starting to take form on the foundation. And you really start to always notice a building when the elevator shaft, which is always the first thing built, is coming out. I think it's important to recognize, even if I go back into these pictures, one of the most critical components of this is we maintained immediately, the first thing we wanted to do was to replace and maintain the groundwater pumping that this building has somewhat been providing the whole block for about 50 years. So I don't know if people know, but there's a lot of groundwater in that area. The Y has been running 2 material size pumps since its inception there, 24/7, always. And so it was critical for us when those came down that we replaced the exact same groundwater pump system as the very first thing we did, so that we continue to manage the groundwater there to the best of anyone's ability. And when it's done, it'll all be kind of right back to what it was. So that's where we are. And then obviously the question goes, where do we go from here? Well, there has been a few snags. So probably the most three. Our original timeline was we really hoped to open these by the end of March. Right from the beginning, I know you all have heard this anecdotally, cost escalations were really difficult. Everything went up from when we had received the funding. And on top of that, the shipping delays of material equipment became a real problem. We mitigated that very well. I think what people don't understand sometimes is you can absorb the cost, you can go into your contingency, but on top of all of that, it just takes that timeline comes out, and every month that you extend probably runs another $100,000 just in the contracting company being there. So it has been brutally important for us to manage the schedule, the cost, so that we can open as soon as possible and really make sure we honor the tax credits and all of the lenders' expectations. They give you a little bit of margin. I think we're pushing up against it. And unfortunately, when you're pushing up against it, before you actually have a building, that gets a little scary. But we are pushing because of that. The cost escalation, SIP and delays were the first real obstacle. Once we got that, because they had to go back out to bid and take that time. The next thing we really ran into was there was some soil remediation necessary. We did all the borings, everything you do, but when you open up the ground, you tend to find something. And what we found was lead in the sand. And so all of the compacted soils basically had to be removed in areas we didn't anticipate. That took some work, but all of that was remediated. When doing that, it showed some discovery of where the existing foundational walls were for the building, because you can't get under there too well. Once we saw that aligned with the soil remediation needs, we did make a foundational change to redesign. So originally it was basically trying to position the new foundation on top of the existing foundation, where it was very thick and very deep. Once we moved some of this, we've made the decision that we shifted to what's called a pile system. So we're putting in some of the piles in an area now that will stabilize. So half of the building will basically be on piles. The other half of the building will basically sit on the existing foundation. So as you can imagine, foundation means everything. So we've slowed down to make sure we don't miss a beat and are chasing cracks in our building 20 years from now. So ultimately, the project's been revised to about 2024. There's been no modifications to the actual way the building will come out. And so far, our pictures look a lot like our buildings end up. So we feel pretty confident on where this is coming. But that March 2024 is optimistically sometime June, maybe July. If it reaches August, other than cry a lot, there's nothing more I can do, but I'm feeling like that's the press we can get to. So that's pretty much where we are. I'm going to stop sharing. It's been really exciting. We've gotten a lot of compliments from all around the neighborhood on our construction team and the way that they work with the neighbors. Not all of it's perfect, but boy, I've been happy so far.
I have a question. So is completion date different than occupancy date?
It's a great question, Ruth. As much as we can squeeze it down. So as you can imagine, we try to give ourselves some cushions in the occupancy date. Our goal is to keep the occupancy date as hard as possible and just push a lot harder on the process. That's where we hope to make up that delta on the requirements for the actual tax credit, so we don't get into any problems with our funders. At this point, I'm optimistic only because if one more of my relatives asks me how they can get their friends on the list, I'm pretty confident that there's a lot of people who want to get on the list. So I don't think we're going to have a problem with lease up.
So
I
just to
just-
clarify, but occupancy could be like a month or two after completion. That sounds like reality.
Yes, and I think originally the occupancy was probably scheduled for 3 to 4 months, I gotta guess. There's usually a little bit of cushion. I don't know the specific date we had agreed to have it rented up. But I think if we're 2 months short on construction, I'm confident we can start the process of the taking applications and doing the raffle and so forth. I'm gonna guess we can get that started earlier and really be ready to rent up sooner. Sooner being to the date we expected, but with less time between construction to have.
Ah.
That's the goal, because if not, we owe the purchasers of our tax credits and our banks and everyone a lot of explanation. And again, every month we're not occupied, the final funding doesn't come in. So it's imperative that we get the occupancy as soon as possible.
When will the, have you already done the application process, or
Nope.
when do you start the application process?
We don't, there's no definitive when you have to, but if you start too soon, you run the risk of not getting actually people committed. So my guess is we usually start that about 2 to 3 months before opening. But like I said, we may start that a little sooner, knowing that we're gonna have a tighter contraction of time. So I would expect to see probably February, March, that process will start to be formalized.
Can you remind me, what the age, the starting age
I
is?
believe that's 55.
55? Is it younger if someone has a disability?
We don't have that. I'd have to go back and look if there is an actual qualification, but I believe we are only with senior housing. So it's not
Okay.
a disability.
Great. And how many ADUs are in that project? I'm just curious, sorry. Didn't put you on the spot.
I would be guessing on it. I've got 3 projects right now and I'm trying to think. I'm trying to see, do you know if do you have a view into the audience? I kind of had thought that David may be on the call and he has a little bit more of those specifics.
David Goodwin, I can
Good one.
allow him to talk if that's okay with the chair.
Would it be okay if we brought David in?
Fine with me.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No. I actually, David's coming in right now and I think David will have a little more clearer answer on some of the details. Hi, David.
Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome.
So the question is, how many units do we have that are ADA compliant for handicap accessibility, I believe, right?
So all of the units are going to be accessible, but for actual
Oh, wow.
all ADA compliant, it's going to be 8 units.
Great. That's great.
Yeah, that's a big number. And David, was I right on the it is age required, or is there anything for individuals with disabilities in this project?
Nope, you were correct, Chris. It's going to be just for the seniors. There's no disability attached to this.
That's what I thought. And how'd I do on the when would we begin the process for the raffle?
So with the anticipated opening of March, we were originally planning for September for the applications. We'll probably push that a little bit, and then we host a lottery about 2 months after that. And then for the actual timeline, for the actual timeline for move-in, so we can actually start working with folks 120 days before we actually move them into the property. So that's kind of our timeline right there.
So if we
Chris
go-
or Andrew, Larry Oakes with the trust, a quick question is, hey, how are you, Chris? Is there a list now that people can put their name on to be contacted as you get closer to the lottery date, or there's not? Not yet.
No, I don't believe so. David, we aren't taking names now, correct?
No, we're not. It's too soon for that. Probably right around September is when, if we don't have the applications available, that's when we'll probably start an internal list of, hey, these folks are interested. Let's make sure we get them the application when the time comes.
But listen, David, when you say September, you don't mean 2023.
Yes,
No.
2023.
Oh,
That was
okay.
original though, Ruth.
Okay.
That's if we were gonna have a March completion with a potential June or July completion, that date pushes with it.
I get it.
We're probably looking more like January for the applications and then probably March for the lottery.
Great.
So
Can I ask a follow-up question on this? Is there a local preference?
Yes. So there's two types of raffles. There will be one if you're a veteran and a veteran who is a resident. So that's your first 5 drawings. Then it would be residents in total. And then if there are not enough, which I don't think is going to be the case, but if it was, then it would be a general open raffle. Is that right,
Great.
David?
Yep, you got it right, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Think Heather, I don't know if you're asking something, but you're on mute.
Yeah, Heather, you might be muted.
Sorry, that's it. I am on mute. So there's no like limit on the residents. The residents will have the first choice, the first pick.
You mean the residents that are in our current building?
So the residents of Gloucester will have the first pick.
Residents,
Are you going to have Gloucester residents be the first picked for the lottery
Gloucester
besides
residents
veterans
and veterans. So,
and veterans?
so if there are enough Gloucester veterans, then that will be the first, I believe, 5 units, right, David?
Correct. First 5 units have local preference.
First
and
5
same for
units.
veterans.
Will be veterans. So unless there is less than 5 Gloucester veterans, then a non-resident veteran would take the next priority.
Okay.
And then the rest is resident preference to remaining units and qualified.
Okay.
Chris and Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about the rent structure itself? And do you have subsidies attached to the project for residents?
So the way that they are set up, and I'll let David go into the details of it, but as we had said to this group and then followed through with planning, ZBA and all others, our units are based on 30% of the average median income, 50% and 60% mixed. To the exact percents, David, do you have those new units?
I do. So right now we have 8 30% Section 8 vouchers, which will be 30% of the income. We have 5 MRVPs, 30%, but it will also be 30% of the income. And then we have 5 MRVPs at 50% for 30% of the income. And then the remaining 26 units will be at the full 60% AMI.
So just so people fully, make sure to capture that, all of the units that other than the 26 have subsidies attached to the unit. So those are in addition to if somebody has a traveling voucher, those can still be applied, but those actually will stay with the units. If someone leaves, you can award them a unit at 30% based on their eligibility that stays with that unit in perpetuity.
And we always welcome travel vouchers. So if anybody has a travel voucher and wants to move in, they're more than happy to.
Any other thoughts, questions? Anybody hearing anything around town?
All good.
I'm glad to hear that, Ruth. Thank you.
I would
Yeah.
second that. All good.
Yep, I agree. I have sort of a this project question for you. There's another Y project happening simultaneously with SROs. Are they going to come forward with funding? Do you have any idea for a
So-
funding request?
I was hoping somebody would bring that up because I didn't feel right doing it, but if you did. So again, in the YMCA of the North Shore structure, what we've kind of found 25 years ago and beyond is these projects are difficult to do, to get funded, to conceive and all of that. This is the John J. Meany Center is our 12th official project. Each project probably takes an average of anywhere between, I'd say from concept to ribbon cutting, probably 5 to 8 years. So if you're just going to do one after the other, you're not going to get a lot done. And so our strategy has always been to have one being developed, one that's sitting before DHCD being considered, and one that's really in planning. It was not my intention to have 2 back-to-back projects in Gloucester that are back neighbors to each other, but sometimes you don't have the say on which project could be ready fast. I was thrilled when DHCD did recognize the potential of the building next door. So for those who know the building next door, depending on how long you've been in Gloucester, you know it as either the Tompkins Furniture Building or the Patillo Building or the Community Center. But it is actually the very first housing project the Y ever did officially with tax credits. It is officially a rooming house. And that means that all the rooms are small dormitory style rooms. They share kitchens, they share bathrooms, and they share common space. And so that building is in desperate need for an upgrade, and that is a complete formerly homeless or in jeopardy of homelessness. The individuals who have been there, there's 23 units. The project that we've put forward to DHCD, and again, just like this project, we are going to need community buy-in and support, or the state does not value it on the checklist. So ultimately, we believe that we can turn those 23 rooming house rooms into 27 studio apartments.
Wow.
Much greater dignity, and it is already a place of great camaraderie. And so the good of it is an internal project. So the exterior of the walls will not come down. There's no demolition. Everything is inside the building would be done. That's not always easier for construction, but a lot less risky on opening up ground and not knowing what you got. So in this case, the project's a bit smaller. Originally, it was looked at as about a $15 million project. We do believe there is great interest. One of the things we've been doing for the last 8 years is slowly stockpiling available tax credits for historic tax credits. So those come about very differently than like a new market tax credit or a LIHTC tax credit. You can apply for those every quarter, and you can get awarded a certain amount, and they basically hold them in reserve. And at some point, you can amass them and use them, and that makes DHCD excited to know you've got $1.5 million of that already there. Add that to the community investment. That may get it up on the, let's vote that one in on the first round, which we hope. So that is going to go in for submission. It actually is in. We should hear back sometime in, I believe, August. David, I might have got that wrong. Is that close, David?
Yeah, you got it right, Chris.
Okay. So that'll be August, and yes, we will be before this group again. And it's kind of fun because a historic project, you know, you really just preserve all of the exterior. It'll look beautiful, cleaned up, but the interior will be really modernized, and you just preserve anything that you have to preserve. Which, by the way, is not the really slow and bad elevator. That is not historic. We put that in. But it's time to upgrade it. So yes, you will be hearing from us.
One more quick question on that project. What will happen to there's current residents in that property, right? What will happen to them?
So in
And
any project that has current residents, you build into the one stop a transition program. That's funded through the project typically, reasonably, but they are pretty aggressive with what they give you, knowing that you are going to have to find temporary housing for probably 18 months or so. So far, we have done that in every one of our projects successfully. I'm a little nervous of it, Deanna, only because I don't know where the world's going to be in, you know, another couple of years. Right now, if I was trying to find 12 to 15 affordable, units, it would probably be hard. But I will say the state is pretty generous with their transitional, funding. So we typically overfund units for 1.5 years. So there are some landlords that appreciate knowing that you're going to have these for 18 months, make a little extra, and then it's guaranteed money.
Yeah.
I don't know if that'll be the case in 2 years, but I am praying it will. There are some of those folks, though, that will qualify for the new building. We are, it's funny you said that. I should have said that. We are exploring the potential of transitional housing as a priority as well. So if the state allows it, we would probably, if there are 7 or 8 people in that building that we know we're gonna end up relocating, they may get an option outside of the veteran housing as a priority.
Great. That's great. Thanks.
No, it's a great question.
Chris, this is an exciting project. I'm looking forward to hearing more about it, hopefully next month. Did you say?
I think it's got to be pretty soon because we've gone and talked to, because again, we always have to get the permitting part done. I think we've talked to planning. David, have we gone to zoning?
We have, yes.
So we've done planning and zoning. I believe we're doing the historic commission next, and then I think you're our next stop.
Great. So I just one question because it jumped out at me. So did you say that you'll have a larger number of studios than you do current SROs? So that's interesting. Do you have extra underutilized space in the building? How are you making that work? Usually studios are bigger,
Yeah,
right? than
exactly. It
SROs.
will be bigger. It's the community center. The community center right now that the police department is in will be incorporated in. The health project has just relocated, so that area is also available. And so a lot of it is also reconfiguration, Larry.
Got it.
But we had to do something because DHCD is not going to pick a project that just maintains units. If you can't get up 3, 4, 5 more units, I don't think you have a shot of a first round or even possibly a second round.
Great.
Does anybody else have any
Anything else?
questions?
I don't have a question, but just a suggestion that I hope that Chris will update Dave Fields, periodically, who can then pass it on to us. It's just a wonderful project for downtown and for the Y and for the community. And I'm glad to hear the update about the community center and that space and what you're planning there. And I understand what you mean about reconfiguring all the property you own, sort of an L-shaped property that you own.
Yep.
That's really good news.
I appreciate it. And David and the administration have been fantastic to work with. Everyone, Greg, the mayor, Jill, David have been great resources. And when we run into issues with the construction or the way the traffic's flowing or any of the stuff we need, they've been amazing to just step in and just help us with. So thank you, David, for that.
Great. Any more questions?
I just wanted to add an extra thank you because this came before the trust, before I was a member. So it's great to hear more detail about the project, and kudos to the YMCA for not having any kind of community backlash for an affordable housing project of this scale. And the support in the community must be, it speaks a lot to the entity that's doing the project. So good for you guys.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. I'm
All
looking
right.
forward to seeing your future
And
projects.
thank
go
you
on.
again. Again, please stop by and introduce yourselves to Irina. She's an amazing executive director. And if you're fortunate enough to meet Mr. Goodwin in person, he's another dynamic person on this team. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy your night.
Thank you.
Okay,
Amazing. That
I
was a
know,
great
that was
update.
great. I'm so glad he came to talk. Thank you, Ruth.
Well, and I'm also sure that he'd be willing to do that. This is July,
Mhm.
maybe October or something. We can talk about it in September and see if it makes sense to have him come back.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the discussion on ARPA. Deanna and I were able to meet. She's gonna go over our thoughts.
Yeah.
Thanks,
So,
Deanna.
thanks, Heather. Yeah, so Heather and I met to talk about our ARPA subcommittee and what was going to be the best approach that we could take. We both sort of agreed that thinking about ARPA as sort of a short-term investment, seeing it's how it's a it's basically a one-time infusion and it has an expiration date. So we want to be able to come up with some planning that has long-term impact for production and preservation of housing and possibly acquisition. So we just want to, explore all the opportunities. We know that we're obligated, the funds have to be obligated by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. So it's if we don't use it, we're going to lose it. And we just, want to make sure that we have some solid planning in place. We want to first sort of refresh our own understanding of how funding can be used for housing specifically, understand the decision-making process with the municipality and the trust as an entity, the review process, approval process, monitoring, so that we're prepared to move forward when we do decide on what programs that we want to look at. In the coming weeks, we want to take a closer look at how other cities are using their ARPA money. We know, for example, that Salem is well in advance of setting programs and working on programs for ARPA. So, what are other communities doing around housing development and preservation with their funding? We want to go back and review the community input with regard to the housing ideas that were the result of the ARPA listening sessions. And kudos to Sunny Robinson, who I see is actually in attendance, who had given us some real concrete input on how to approach this. I think that the community input will be important, whether we can just rely on the notes from the listening sessions or whether we need to explore some additional community input in another way. We'll see. We want to think about consideration of the types of households that are going to be served by any projects that we put forward. What would, be the affordability element? What, is it seniors? Is it families? Is it workforce housing? We want to also connect with folks from the Chamber of Commerce to they really represent, this workforce housing sector. The Housing Authority, Action, Wellspring, Pathways, Open Door, Harbor Light, North Shore CDC, and get their input on what they're thinking. Is anybody putting together projects or have ideas for projects and talk about need and such? Are there any barriers that we might encounter along the way that we need to consider? These are things that we need to sort of have an understanding of. And also, I don't know, maybe David can talk about this, exploring any potential. I've been reading that, there's some cities and counties that are combining ARPA funds with other funding sources. So maybe there's something that we can do in collaboration with another department or program within the city that we can really strengthen the impact. So ultimately, our goal is to identify projects or programs involving housing production and preservation, both rental, homeowner properties. We'd like to prioritize shovel-ready projects, specifically for workforce housing, where we were throwing around ideas for possibly a tiered down payment program that might take the city's current down payment program a little bit further. And maybe that could be tied in with inclusionary zoning lotteries, for example, or tied in with the Gloucester Housing Authority first-time home buyer programs. Something that targets maybe a little bit more, middle class home buyer. Yeah, thanks, Heather. And we are interested in the first right of refusal program that Salem has. So we're going to explore that a little bit closer and see if that might be something that we could do. I mean, Heather's in real estate. I've been following real estate for a long time. We've lost a lot of multifamily housing. So if there's a possibility that we could create a first right of refusal for 2, 3, multifamily housing in Gloucester, that might be a really useful program. Financial incentives for more inclusionary zoning and ADU projects, and even consideration of a one-time affordable housing development or rehab with city-owned or purchased land or property are all, all things that we'd like to take a look at and see and bring back to the larger committee and see what has legs.
I really appreciate all that work, if I may say so, Heather. And I'd love to have some, you don't have to answer me now, but I love all those ideas you came up with, and how does it fit into the TOD? Whole idea of protecting multifamily ownership.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. So it's just an interesting way to look at what's coming down the road with the TOD.
Yes.
Lots of multifamilies in that whole place, that whole region. And I love it that you're looking into Salem, because Salem's pretty progressive in its housing work.
Yeah, I mean, we had like a 2-hour conversation today, so we talked about so much, but I mean, yes, if anybody ever wants to come too, I'm not sure how many people can come without us posting. David will have to tell us that, but yeah, we went over so much today that I think that's our next step, is to kind of start looking at things and not reinvent the wheel, and start with some easy projects that we can accomplish and then move on from there. So, yeah.
So more to come.
Yeah, I thank you for that and for the list. One thing just to be cognizant of, it is July. As you pointed out, the funds do need to be completely encumbered should you want to spend all of them by December. So when we're
Right.
talking about starting new programs, that's going to take in itself a significant amount of time.
Are you talking about December of 2023?
24.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah,
Phew.
we have a year and a few months, year and a half.
Right. So I just wonder, I mean, you mentioned a couple things, I think maybe compiling your list and going back to look at it in the lens of the strategic plan may be helpful to see what goals overlap.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
finding a concrete project, or, working with, I'm happy to work with whomever if we want to find an actual project to spend some money on that comes up out of the ground or is purchased and in some way rehabbed, or whatever it is that we want to do, might be an excellent way of creating units and committing, I guess you'd say, a significant portion of the funding. Because I think the buy downs are good, but I don't think that'll actually amount to spending, a significant portion of the funding. So something to think about, and, happy to talk to anybody offline about potential sites or future projects or something that we want to do.
Yeah, next time we meet, if you want to join in, that'd be great, because
Yeah, because I
That's
think
great.
it would be good to get a big injection of units into the pipeline.
Great. I think Heather and I will schedule some time with you then.
yeah, definitely.
Sounds good.
I'm not sure how this would work, Deanna, but I'm curious whether the trust needs to be proactive in terms of building around. The only way I can describe what I'm thinking about is an RFP. Looking for people who own multifamilies, people who are small builders, all of that. So, yeah, I mean, I love all that, all the tiered ideas you have.
Yeah, and you definitely have experience. So yeah, if you, again, anybody wants to hop in, we'll definitely do it. We'll take it on, I should say.
I think one thing, sorry to drag this out, but one thing you could work on in the interim, instead of doing an RFP for a call for people, we could even just develop an application process where if it's something that everybody votes on and we know it's something you want to do, that way it would streamline it, and it's just, you apply to us, here's the application. If all the criteria that you define checks out,
Right, exactly.
not necessarily here's your check, but effectively that's kind of what that would move some money.
Yep.
David, can you, maybe it's a newcomer question that I'm asking, but can you explain what encumbered means in this case?
It means basically committed. So on our books, it's committed to a certain project or a certain program, and it's off the books for ARPA and onto another balance sheet effectively. So it's not fully spent, meaning we haven't cut checks to a certain vendor, but it's committed elsewise.
And if I understand it from the last meeting, in order for it to be encumbered, we actually have to have a program in place. So right now,
Yeah,
the funding is just allocated to us as sort of a promissory thing. But, you know, there's risk that there could be other priorities that change that. Election results could change that. Other conditions might change that. So we want to make sure that we start working on putting some programs in place.
yeah, ideally, it'd be great if, since you are a trust fund, once we move the money that counted towards encumbrance, we checked into that, because I was kind of thinking / hoping that's what it would be. But you do actually need to commit it to a project or program or something. It's not, the feds look at it as the city cutting a check to the city, which doesn't count. So, but we have time. I don't want to be alarmist. It's just setting up programs and things which I've done takes time.
No, that's good to know. That is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I keep getting booted off. I'm not sure why, but it lets me back in. So, but yeah, okay. Did you have anything else, Tina? Or any other questions?
No, I mean, just if anybody else wants to be involved in sort of this, I don't know, initial scoping of projects, feel free to reach out to either myself or Heather.
Well, this isn't a question, and I already said how much I appreciate the work you've done, but I think all of us need to be thinking about what our priorities are personally, priorities for housing in Gloucester. And what I think I'm hearing is that we take that bulk amount of money, we say we want this amount to go to that. That's what we're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. I mean, I think that's how it works, right? We define the program and how much it will cost. And then,
Yeah, I think, yes, keeping in mind that, if it's a program, the funds can't be held in reserve, is the only thing. So just food for thought.
mhm,
And then
it
thinking
has to
about,
move.
yeah, thinking about what we worked on with Gen 2 with, are you guys project initiators, project funders, a mix of both? It could be a mix of both. There's no wrong answer there. It's just
Right.
keep that in the back of your heads.
Right. But it could be in collaboration with another programmer, department, or within the city, right? We could partner with.
It could be in collaboration with, anything else that you could make work. I don't know. I don't think that there's any city departments that are buying housing or, trying to create housing units necessarily. But yeah, certainly in collaboration with our entitlement funds, there's opportunities there.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
I think we lost Heather again.
Oh, no.
Let me see.
Yeah, that's all I have on that subject. Sorry,
right.
I'm gonna mute because motorcycle traffic's gonna be going by my house now.
Oh, there she's back. Heather, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm back again. Sure why I keep getting kicked out, but
All right, I think we put the ARPA one to bed. We're moving on to the next one.
okay, great. Do you want me to let everybody know where we're at?
So it's review discussion on consulting scope of services.
Okay. Does anybody want to start? I don't really have to listen to this.
I mean, I can just say a few words. I know we talked about this last time. I didn't seem to have a lot of traction, but didn't want to lose sight of it. If in light of the conversation we just had, if anybody wants to also rethink finding somebody to help either set up these programs or talk about things that you could do with either the ARPA money, future funding, the short-term rental money, whatever it may be, we can continue working on that, but I don't want to face a rabbit that is going down the hole.
Right. We did talk about that a little bit today about whether or not to hire somebody to help out. I think we want to kind of organize our thoughts first and see what we would hire this consulting person to do. But other than that, I mean, I'm all for consultants. I think I would never say no to somebody that already knows what they're doing. Does anybody have any questions or? No? Can't hear you. There we go. Now I can hear you again. I don't know what's
Sorry.
going on with my internet today.
Well, I was muted. David, maybe you could just do a quick kind of overview of it for Larry, who was not part of the previous conversations around what
Yeah,
the scope is and the need is for a consultant.
sure. So last time we talked a little bit about basically developing a scope of services if we wanted to hire a consultant. So a strategic plan was finished up for the trust earlier this spring. One of the recommendations was to get some quote unquote professional help, meaning, you know, somebody we could pay to kind of move the plan along, execute some things that frankly are beyond your control / ability as volunteers with your limited time, and that's completely understandable. But the scope of services can be whatever the trust wants it to be, really. In the past, I've had things like recordation of units onto the subsidized housing inventory, actually setting up and doing a housing lottery. I don't, you know, we're obviously not there yet. Units haven't been created. We don't have anything to have a lottery for. But those are just kind of examples. But at this planning stage, with the funds that you do have, if there's something identified that a consultant could help execute, it'd be great to take advantage of that, just to move it along. But that was, I think, more or less the gist of it.
And bear
Great,
with me,
thanks.
did we put an RFP out for that? But
It depends. So we could, it might not be an RFP depending on the amount of money looking to be spent. So it really, like I said, the scope could be enormous or it could be very small and discrete, a couple $1,000s.
okay. Larry, did you have a question?
No, I appreciate the explanation though. Thanks, David. I've a fair amount of experience in this whole arena, so I think the idea of a consultant to help frame out what we're going to do it makes a lot of sense. Very smart. Particularly with the timeline you've outlined.
Anybody else?
I just think that our goal is to develop our priorities. And then a consultant can help us figure out how to get them done. I'm not thinking a consultant is going to help us decide what our priorities are. I think we as a group can come up with what our priorities are, and then they help us understand how to make them happen.
So would those priorities be specifically for the ARPA funding or in general, our strategic plan moving?
The opera funding, you know, and all the ideas you brought up today are all familiar to me. So first-time home buyer programs, the protection of multifamilies, supporting the TOD, whatever those we decided as a group are our priorities and how we sort out to address them, then a consultant can help us see. You'll never be able to get that done. Well, this is how this would work to get that done.
Mhm. Especially with the timeline constraint. So,
Yeah.
And can I jump in again? So Deanna and Ruth, you're absolutely right. And maybe what we could look for a consultant to do is help us frame out a mechanism, design and implement a mechanism for dispersing the money where there's kind of categories, right? We come up with potential uses, categories of uses, and we kind of then let the world of nonprofits, these terrific nonprofits that exist in Gloucester, kind of know about the opportunity and bring in projects that fit in one of the categories we identify and build into, if it's an RFP or whatever it is ultimately.
Yep,
I
agreed.
think, yeah,
And I think there are some builders who are interested in projects that include a portion of eligible market affordable rates. Not quite sure how to word that. And they're out there too. They're out there.
we say set asides in the affordable housing world, right? So dedicated set aside of affordable units within a larger market rate community that, right, 10, 20, 30%, some amount of units set aside and targeted to a particular group of people at a particular income. I think you're right, Ruth. That's the way of the world.
I've got a question. What, how involved can we get as a housing trust, as an initiator, and how involved can we get in the actual development of some of the units?
You can buy, hold, sell, lease real property, so you
Could
can
we-
do that.
If there was city-owned property, is there a way that we could even put together a proposal so that we actually take the lead in part of the development and building of the units? Is that?
That's something that could happen. You'd obviously have to partner with a builder or, a contractor of some sort or development entity that's actually going to physically do the work.
How involved can we get in the physical work, I guess is my question. How, I
Like
mean,
actually
hire-
swinging the hammers or.
No, more from a, almost like a developer contractor being able to, bring in the different trades, bring in the, excavation, bring in the, say, for instance, you did it with some type of modular construction. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can almost initiate some, put together and try to get, and try to take more of a lead, more as a sort of more developer look at a project.
We talked
it
about
sounds
that
like
today,
you're-
actually.
So it sounds like you're asking more about taking a project management role in the actual project itself.
Well, just to make sure, oftentimes it's, I mean, you can get a nonprofit comes into town and do it like but I'm just wondering if more, sometimes it's on an individual lot. It might be, there might be something that can get pushed faster forward than having it going through a tremendous amount of time. I'm just wondering if there's a way to do that. I mean, we might, as the board has grown, we might have more of a capacity to manage something like that, especially with the mayor's office trying to take city-owned property and try to turn it into affordable housing. I think that there might be some opportunities as long as, and I think we, again, as the board grows, we get more people that can take part in managing that and the construction aspects, and I'm just thinking that might be something that we could maybe be a little bit stronger in sort of putting forward, maybe partnering certainly, but I think maybe taking a leadership role and
Yeah,
saying,
I'm sorry, Chris, just quick question on that. So you're saying take maybe the 1.5 and do our own projects, like
not
condo-
necessarily, no more, is it an option? Is it an option that it might be, that we could
Yeah.
try to do that and partner up in certain ways? I just think I do it for a living, so it's easy for me to do that, not from the affordable housing standpoint, but more just from a standpoint of, designing, getting the units, making sure they meet the ADA requirement if necessary, the zoning. It's easy and it's easy to do from my standpoint, because I've done it over 125 times, I guess. So if there's a way that we can do that and not lose opportunities to capture some of that 1.5 in some way, I just, there's certainly people that do it consistently, like Habitat. But it's something, if we find opportunities that we don't lose them, to be able to put something on, design something and see if the numbers make sense and the sizes make sense in zoning. And it's just a thought where, I wouldn't want to miss some opportunity just because we're afraid to jump on something and take more of a management role. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is a perfect example of what you're talking about, Chris, but at Haven Terrace, which was 100% affordable,
Yeah.
this was being foreclosed and it was going to be lost to the affordable, the definition of affordable. And
So
so
go onto the market as a market rate. Yes.
bought it. So I bought it at foreclosure, so they rehabbed it and resold it, and it remains affordable. So that's a perfect example of, I think, what you're talking about.
More from a ground up standpoint, vacant land or something. Yeah, I mean, more, or even anything, even if it's adding on a unit to purchasing something and adding something on. Really, more taking more of a management, I guess someone mentioned, sort of look at projects and not waiting for a manager to come along and work on a small project, because it might not be within their, it might not make sense to them to do something like that. If we can do it and make it 100% affordable.
I
why not?
love that idea. I don't know if we'd be allowed to do that.
That's what I'm wondering.
How could we find that out,
Dave?
David?
So I've never heard of that before, and I think the sticky wicket there is going to be basically every single decision that you make on the project would need to be a vote of the trust. So unless you're going to meet multiple times a week to go over change orders, which you could do, I suppose. I don't know how feasible that is. I can check with legal, our counsel, to see if that's something. I know you can acquire property. I don't know about managing a construction project.
As
Yeah.
a trust, I mean, the trust, really, the trust managing it, not, decisions made by the trust, not a private person, but managers that would be the trust itself building something on.
I think you
Again,
have
I'm
to
not,
have another subcommittee to do that, so that it wasn't entire, but a subcommittee. Yeah, that would be interesting to see if we could do it.
and Dave, if something can be designed as again, I've done most of my adult life, modules, once the change orders, if designed right, there aren't many change orders except outside. So a lot of it, there wouldn't be really change orders once something arrives.
Yeah, I guess that was just an example. I more meant
I'm just
any
saying,
minute detail.
yeah, I'm just saying from a decision standpoint, it's pretty much stamped the way it's going to be finished. And that way there wouldn't be a tremendous amount of making decisions when something arrived. It would probably, the specs would be already complete as to exactly all the details, flooring and other things. But yeah, it was just a thought that I'm just not sure how the trust can act as a manager to do a 100% affordable project. That's something to check into, I guess.
Heather, can I jump in? Chris, thanks for that. I think there's a lot to the idea, and especially modular construction is pretty cool, right? And a good way to kind of manage construction risk differently, I think.
Yeah.
I didn't really introduce myself at the beginning of the call, and I probably should in my background. So I've spent 30 years in the community development field, working really all over the country, pretty closely with trusts like this one and government departments and housing departments in big and small cities. And I think it would be fairly atypical to do what Chris just described, which isn't to say that it couldn't be done, but really, like, the way of the world is really focused on organizations like this getting the dollars out to the groups that do this work every day in the community. I think it's because, like in this case, as David said, with a really tight timeline, the learning curve to become affordable housing developers for a group like this would be quite steep. And then there's all these issues of kind of that David started to touch on, like without a track record of success in applying for state funds, which would be, probably required for most projects that are sizable. We'd have to answer the question of how to turn ourselves into a development entity, and how would we address sort of that lack of institutional experience. We don't have employees at the moment. I think you were right, David, to touch on that. That suddenly the requirements on us would be to meet weekly and to kind of manage the nitty gritty of a development deal, if you want to call it that. So I think in this case, where there's a need to commit funds in 14 to 18 months, I would suggest I'm not trying to throw a wet blanket on the idea entirely, but I do think when we have to get the money committed by a year and 4 months from now, we should probably be looking to the groups in the community that do the work now, that can really have momentum already and bring live projects to us. But I think the idea is really interesting, Chris, that you just raised. I just think it would take some time and study and consideration to figure out how to make it actually work in a practical way.
I mean, I think if we talk to what was our consultant before and ask if there's, if she hasn't seen anything like that, then I would say let's do exactly what you're saying. But if she says, I've seen this in Sudbury, they did a project like this, so let's at least take a look at it. That's all.
Sudbury, huh?
I don't know, she's done work all
Name.
over the western Metro West there, so. No, but I mean, that might be something that a question that we could ask. Maybe I'll send her an email and ask her. But no, it was just a thought as to how we can be a little bit more in control of our destiny, I guess.
But on that, I mean, I get that, right? There's a certain amount of faith you have to have if you're gonna say, we have $1.5 million and we're gonna put it on the street in a year and a half by waiting for people to bring us their ideas. That's a little, that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, that what if the bell doesn't ring? What if groups don't show up? But right, I took a lot of solace from Chris Lavasco's presentation, right? Where he's got a second deal in his pipeline, 30 units of SRO housing right downtown. I know there are other projects in this city's pipeline that are coming behind that one. I think getting the money into the hands of the groups that have experience and know what they're doing, some of whom might do modular work.
And I talk about really just small infill. That's what I wouldn't refer to.
Yeah.
Project. I'd refer to something that was very on a small lot, something very modest. One or two, or even a 3-family at the most. That's all I would. That's what I was thinking. Not anything sizable at all because of the timeline. Yeah.
Right. Does anybody have anything else?
I do this every meeting. It's really helpful to me. I know it's the same time every month, but the next meeting is August 21st, correct?
David, do you have the next meeting right there? I can look it up.
I will have to look it up.
Doesn't say it on here.
That's what I have is August 21st, the third Monday.
Sounds good to me.
Does that work
Yep.
for everybody?
Thanks,
Alright.
guys.
And I just have a quick question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
A quick question. Did we cover the letter from Sunny early on in the meeting or not? Do we want to address that? She sent the board a notice. We want to, I'm not sure if we want to talk.
She's actually on the call. If we could,
Hello, Sunny.
we could plug her in and have her make her own comments if people are open to that.
Is everybody okay with that?
It's not that I'm not okay with that, but I'm wondering if it's best if we absorbed what she recommended and then had her as a panelist or not, whatever it's called, the next meeting. I mean, I read but I just,
And maybe you're probably right, because then we'll have more concrete ideas of what we're gonna do with this ARPA money anyway. I just need a few more weeks.
Okay, got it.
so Sunny, if you're listening to us, next meeting, we'll have your own agenda. Does that sound good, Heather?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Great.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion
Well,
to
wait a
adjourn.
minute. I always want to remind everyone not to miss the Gloucester 400. There's tons of things going on. Half of it's gone. And if you missed it, it's on you.
Thanks, Ruth.
So
Thank
much
you.
happened in August.
Thanks,
September.
everybody. Nice to meet you all.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I just,
Thank you,
Larry, before everybody goes, I just want to say thank you for stepping up and being
Yeah.
involved in the Affordable Housing Trust. I think your experience and knowledge is going to be a huge benefit to us, and I'm really excited that to have you be a part of it.
Yes,
Thanks
thank
for letting
you.
me be here. Thank you all. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Did we get a second to adjourn, or are we good?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Bye.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
all.